Hello, Bishop Walsh coming to you from the backyard of my residence here on this Wednesday, August 3rd. And just start off with a reflection on religious liberty. There's a recent Supreme Court decision, as we know, and a recent Michigan State Supreme Court decision that in many ways will challenge us as Catholics to deepen our faith and to help us to understand it in a way that can be communicated and understood in our culture. And I know it seems sometimes our faith is presented as being out of step or not as progressive as it needs to be, keeping up with the times. But we should remember that the church has always been entrusted with defending and preserving and passing along the deposit of faith that is solidly enshrined in the sacred scriptures and then given in the living tradition of the church and her teachings that we understand is coming from the Lord himself as well. And yes, it requires us to humble ourselves. Sometimes our pride, our ego, our intellect, in some ways when we are kind of coming up against some of the hard realities of our life on earth. And sometimes our own human tendencies lead us in ways that are contrary to the ways of God. We understand from Scripture, God's ways are not our ways. And it's not up to us to make God into our image, but to allow us to be made into God's image. And God will help us do that through the sacraments. And ultimately, his design is for our happiness and for our human flourishing in its most dynamic way. So as we go through the life of our church, we adhere to that and trust it. So how do we communicate that to the world? That'll be our challenge each day in a loving way, to understand and promote the value of human dignity from the first moment of conception until natural death, and to promote the dignity of marriage and family life as the best pathway for human flourishing and for happiness of spouses and children, and ultimately for the good ordering of society. So those will be things that we'll know that there will be opposition, there'll be concern, there'll be those who will walk away when those truths are proclaimed. But we can only adhere to what Jesus taught us. And the truths are forever ancient and yet forever new. Those ways that God teaches us abide in our hearts, and we come to ultimately realize that there are powers and principalities that we need to overcome, allowing God's grace to do so. The victory has already been won by Christ. And when we participate in that, we too will rise with Christ. And we trust that all of our efforts, individually and as a church, will ultimately, even if they lead us to some aspects of pain and sorrow, being alienated from the culture, that it's not our intent to do so, but it's our intent to be the leaven in the bread and the salt of the earth. And we do so by proclaiming the truth of the Lord. And that will be the best pathway forward and to get us to heaven. Just a brief reflection also on the trip I made to Minnesota was wonderful. I brought my bike with me and I completed the 10-mile section up near Mackinac City between Mackinac and Sheboygan. So I got all 73 miles of the North Central Trail finished between biking and walking it. So I'm going to start on the other two coming up. But when I drove over the northern route, enjoyed the coastline of the Upper Peninsula, went over the Mackinac Bridge for the first time, saw Green Bay and the Lambeau Field. That was exciting. And then as I drove through Wisconsin, I saw a sign in Sparta that it was the bicycle capital of the world. And I found out that that's the first place where they started the rails to trails. And I did a 2-hour bike ride on that. And then just the beauty of the ceremony for Bishop Barron's installation was wonderful to experience as well. And my ride home, came back the southern route and stopped in Kalamazoo for the first time and biked around the city for 2 hours. And just enjoyed the whole trip. I'm going to be going to Cleveland tomorrow for the installation of Bishop Woost as the auxiliary bishop of Cleveland. It's in our region. And also looking forward to this weekend going to Mayo, to the shrine for Mass, and to the Boynes, special Mass for the Polish festival, and spending time with our seminarians this weekend, rafting and having a cookout. So let us continue to flourish with God's grace and put ourselves in His hands for all our necessary needs and the gifts that God gives us to build us up as a community of faith. Thank you for checking in. God bless.